Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Fake Accents Unite. It is my great pleasure, of course, to bring you the recovered, at least I hope so, the recovered Britisher. Good evening, sir.
Well, I mean, you can't possibly call me recovered. That would deny me my martyrdom. Good evening, anyway.
You can't be considered a victim, Britisher. I'm sorry, it's not part of the agreement. We have a contract.
Yes, I know. Male white privilege. That's what you're about to tell me about, aren't you?
I mean, I'm still charging you for the time that you took off.
Of course,
of your own channel. It was not when I summoned you from the ether and beyond and bound you into that jar. There was nothing in there about holiday time, right? For whatever reason. So I'm afraid it's just not happening. We're also joined.
Moving on.
We're also joined by the same guest as last week. We have Poe the Person, who's joining us. Good evening.
Yeah, I guess I'm becoming a regular now.
Good. Got to be careful with that. We're still testing your metal. We'll see how it goes with that one.
I've been proving my metal on unpopular opinions.
We all cut our teeth somewhere.
I'm testing full metal.
You also point out the fact that this is where you're supposed to weigh in and rub your larger sub count in my face or something like to that degree. But no, that's where you're supposed to, because if I'm talking,
I didn't. I had a larger sub count. I mean, the British never stooped so low. No matter how much you bully him.
You don't know what he's like out of hours. He's actually a very abusive partner. We're also joined by Callum, or Secretary of Akkad, as he goes by on Twitter. How are you this evening?
Pretty good. What are we talking about today? I forgot whatever the list was. I've forgotten literally everything.
Well, it's a good thing that you have forgotten the list, because several items on the list have either moved around and other stuff's been added and other stuff's been cut away. But there's a few things. The first thing is what I have on screen at the moment, which is that activists have decided to topple another statue. This one of Frederick Douglass, the former slave, social reformer, and abolitionist. Himself a black man. Where the racism abounds, no doubt. Have you read anything about this, any of you?
No, I haven't.
But Frederick Douglass is, and I saw the headline, and just to let you know, I tried to retweet the article without reading it, and I don't know if this is a new function. Twitter said, "Would you like to read the article first?" I felt so called out.
I've not actually seen that. No, that's quite funny. And Twitter has certainly not asked me to read something. It must be It must be some of that systemic sexism that I keep hearing about, where it just assumes that women are incapable of reading, and just so whenever you click on something now, it's going to say, "Would you like to read that? Would you? We're empowering you to read, Poe. We're empowering you."
You've never seen it because you actually do click on the articles that you retweet.
It's entirely possible. But BBC says, a statue of the 19th century US black activist Frederick Douglass has been toppled in New York State. It appears to have been vandalized on the 5th of July, since yesterday, the anniversary of a famous speech that the former slave gave in 1852. In it, he said, Independence Day celebrations were a sham in a nation that still enslaved black citizens. His statue in the city of Rochester could have been targeted in retaliation for attacks on monuments linked to slavery, activists said. So no one's claimed responsibility for it so far. But apparently,
you make it sound like it's the Taliban or something, like they're going to call in.
Yes, we're just.
So effectively, the claim is that this is some kind of false flag operation.
Yeah, or that the Nazis have got so pissed off that they're going to attack abolitionists.
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't possibly be, it couldn't possibly be, heaven forfend, that they're that busy toppling, well, just about everything. I mean, last week they were burning an elk. I mean,
Well, yes, I saw the elk burning, actually.
Yes. You do kind of begin to wonder whether they haven't just completely lost the plot and are just going at anything that's bronze.
The idea of commemorating anything in a statue is racist.
I think the British is probably right here, though, because you remember that Polish chap who gave his inheritance to abolish slavery, and they still attacked it.
Yes.
So almost, I'm gonna just assume it's the guys who are going around pulling down statues. But it's quite interesting that CHOP, this idea of having a place where there'll be no police, therefore there'll be no killing of black people needlessly, has ended with the killing of a black teenager, I believe.
In
I
fact,
wonder.
six people died over the course of that.
Yeah, but I think the black teenager was the last one. Was he not? Anyway, the point is, that's how that turns out. I wonder if this slavery, pulling down statues of slavers, is literally going to end with this one, where it's you're starting to pull down former slaves. The hell are you doing, chaps?
Yeah, I mean, it's very likely, as Britisher mentions, that it is some BLM activists who have or just activists in general, who have absolutely no cognitive awareness of who the statues are that they're actually pulling down. There's just an assumption that odds are that if they pull down a statue, then it's going to be of someone who has something problematic in their past. And we saw it with the 52nd Massachusetts Regiment, which they vandalized. And of course, that was an entirely black monument to an entirely black regiment. But
Rose of Dawn on Twitter was asking what, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, she was saying, what statues can we definitely say will never be taken down? And my response was that I'm pretty sure every single statue in London is of a person who believes there's only two genders, or believed that when they were alive. So there really is no defense.
No, they can invent anything that they like, effectively, because the moral standards are so changing in today's atmosphere, and they will continue to change, as they have always done, which is why we have periods of time that we define by effectively moral regime changes. There's a big difference not just in architectural style, but in social style and in fashion style and social attitudes between the Victorians, the Edwardians, the Tudors, and all sorts.
Well, you see, that's where you're completely wrong.
Do tell.
Because slavery was just evil. It just was.
Yes.
You see, I had a let's say I had a sort of little contretemps on Twitter with somebody who was very, very woke and who just kept on insisting, but it was evil. And when you sort of try to say, well, you do understand that history is an evolution. You need to effectively evolve certain things. You don't get the car without the wheel. You need to.
Of course, slavery. Yeah, it's like, of course, slavery was evil. It was evil from the perspective of today, from the perspective of everyone. Pretty much.
No, but nobody wanted to be a slave. Nobody wanted to be a slave, and people fought not to be slaves, so therefore it was evil, and they knew it was evil then, so it was evil. You see, it was evil. Evil.
I'm trying to draw a comparison. I'm trying to find an example of someone.
You can see where one kind of realizes that one can't break through to this person. And when you
they have the rhetoric so deeply ingrained.
I just don't think you have sufficient comprehension of the nature of history to kind of understand where I'm going here. I will let you know, I have studied history for years, so there. And you just go, yeah.
Life.
Get this straight. Are you saying that you encountered someone who was wrong on Twitter?
It was a surprise to me. It was the first time it's ever occurred.
Life in history was often short, usually brutal, and definitely a lot more paranoid than it is today. Although perhaps that paranoid is there.
When I try to put it to this person that certain things are bound to change in future, and that we may be condemned for not having lived up to those standards.
Well, just take something like something which is relatively uncontroversial today, which is, say, the use of lead in paint or something like that, and people used to put it on their faces and all sorts, and gave them cancerous sores, and you go, well, of course, we understand today that was terribly immoral, not just from the perspective of the people putting on themselves, but the people who were mixing it up and selling it to people who must have known. They must have known that over time these people were becoming grossly deformed and getting all these sores from all the makeup that they were selling. They must have understood it from their own factory workers or the people who employed the matchstick girls who all got phossy jaw and stuff like that from chewing the phosphorus matchsticks and stuff like that. Oh, how could they possibly have done that? It's simply because they just weren't aware. The scientific empiricism also wasn't a thing. Product testing was less developed. All of these different social and scientific and economic advances, which we take for granted today, which just didn't exist. Just did not exist.
Things which we are still to discover that we're doing wrong now that we haven't got a clue and we're completely clueless about.
Well, it's
which in 10 years' time, someone will point out, hang on a moment, that's why a certain part of the population are falling off their perches.
Well, let's say for the sake of argument, just as a hypothetical, that the green energy wave or whatever it is gets fully off the ground, and in 100 years, no one is using any fossil fuels whatsoever.
Or eating meat.
Sorry?
Eating meat,
or buying dairy, and just it's a hypothetical, and those people look back and they go, look how savage the people in the early millennium were to have lived in such a barbaric and savage way.
Well, you see,
yes.
When I put that concept to him, that basically if you're condemning the people of the past, you're effectively agreeing with the people of the future condemning you. And after I had kind of painfully explained, as in, things will change and there will be different standards in the future, then one came out with, of course, it had to be, oh, well, you see, I hope that in the future they will have abolished poverty and racism and misogyny, and you just go, yes, that's not how it works. You don't get to select a list of things of which you approve that then get to change. It's precisely the stuff that you have no idea, that you just take for completely granted. Those things change, and that's what condemns you.
It's also a national and an international narrative. So for all we know, the biggest, I hope, aside from things like world wars, the Iraq War and stuff like that, which will naturally be condemned in time, you'll have things like the fact that we employed kids in sweatshops in China or whatever to produce our shoes and hair dye and stuff like that, and so the SJWs will be under a moral injunction because of course they should know better, and they have access to the internet and all the wealth of information that provides. And therefore, they all knew clearly, and they just didn't care. So it was in the past, it was an immoral time. They knew that child slavery was going on to produce their consumer goods, but they just didn't do anything about it. We shall do something about it now, but we're going to tear down the internet forums which discuss these things. Or something to that effect. I don't know. Whatever replaces statues.
I mean, what one often forgets, of course, is that the whole thing would also work, vice versa. If you would bring someone from the distant past to observe our world, they would be appalled. They would be absolutely staggered. So it's merely that obviously they cannot condemn us because they're not around, but we would conflict with their attitudes as much as they conflict with ours, because it's a different world.
And the people of the future will likely be as insufferable to us as we are to our predecessors, and looking in the opposite direction as well.
I do, though, have a feeling that they're not going to look back at a time of statue toppling and go, ooh, goody, that was really a highlight.
Yeah, well, you're not on the right side of history, Britisher, so of course you wouldn't think that. It's strange. Sorry, Callum, go on.
Sorry, I was just saying, if you want to scroll down to the National Garden of American Heroes, I was wondering what you made of this.
The National Garden of American Heroes. Is this in stream chat?
No, this is on your article.
Oh, okay. Right.
So in response to all these statues being taken down, President Donald Trump has ordered the creation of the National Garden of American Heroes.
Amazing.
To be honest, it just sounds pretty cool.
So what he's planning to do, I'm guessing here, is a similar thing that they've done in some parts of Eastern Europe, whereby, after they took down all the Lenins and the Stalins and the Marxes and the Engels and whatever, because they didn't want them in their town centre, rather than smash them up or throw them in the harbour, as some of the Western sophisticates do, they kind of moved them to a park.
No, this is he wants new American heroes to be created. So he wants new statues to be created, presumably to replace any ones which have been destroyed, but also additional statues of which we can be proud. Which
Well,
is
in
why
that case, somebody should inform him that I'm not American.
Which is why he has said, well, I think your uniform gives that away, not to mention the car. But
The name.
it says, the name, that's a good start. Mr. Trump insisted the new statues must be lifelike, not abstract or modernist.
Yes, I'm with him there, yes.
Certainly.
Sorry to interrupt. The chat has pointed out you failed to introduce Secretary of Akkad.
I
No, you did.
introduced him.
Okay,
No,
well,
no.
They're confused about who it is.
No, don't worry, it's not important.
So, what's your?
It's Sargon, he's just on a different mic, so he sounds different.
It's like, oh dear.
I'm just trying to get the list of people they actually want to put in this garden, because I want to know if it's going to be like the British says.
Whilst you're doing that, what's your actual YouTube channel called at the moment?
Britannica Politica, but I need to just change that to my name at some point.
Okay, Britannica Politica. He is also the Secretariat for Sargon of Akkad, and does all his PA work. Very valuable job, as well as some video editing and all sorts and carting equipment around. And he's
what do you call it? Like, you have the knight, and then you have that guy who follows the knight around. What's that guy called? Squire. There we are.
Squire, yes. The academic agent says,
It's a much better name.
The academic agent says, Sec of Akkad, thanks for the data the other day, mate. Good stuff.
I'll probably send. Should we talk about that on stream? So the 2020 prison population data was released, I think it's 3 days ago now.
Right.
And some of the trends show that the British government is Islamophobic and hates atheists, is what I can get out of it.
Right.
So I'll send you that now. But
yes, please. That would be good. Anything that we want to finish off on statues and Donald Trump's National Garden of American Heroes? Because, of course, it's...
I also like that name. You were praising it earlier, but I just wanted to join in. That is a great name. I want to go there one day.
It's strong. I wonder, the only thing with it is, and this is the thing that I deal with when it comes to American monuments compared to British. I always compare it when I walked the Normandy beaches for charity. Shameless moralizing virtue
Humble
signal
brag.
there. Humble brag. And there, obviously there's there's two sets of graveyards in effect, and one of them is the American one, which is enormous, I have to say, and then there's the British one, which is slightly smaller. I'm sure there are others around, but those are the two that I visited. And the British one is a rather small affair, tucked at the back of a town, and it's very, very well kept, gorgeously well kept. And it's separated into two plots. The main large plot, which is for British fallen, and a smaller plot for the, I believe it's just the officers, but German officers who fell as well. And there is a very touching, serene place to be. And then I went to the American graveyard, where an American tour guide took us round, told me to walk on the graves. Apparently, it was respectful, and so they talked about how they allow children to gather sand from the beach to rub it into because all the graves are white with sort of engraving in it, but it's not a metal engraving. It's just carved into the side of the cross, so they can push the sand in there, and then the sun comes up and lights it up, and it's very sparkly and very pretty. But the whole thing has a very commercial feel to it. There's even a gift shop, at the other end of it, and I walked around it, and I was getting almost angry until I realised that it's just the American way to be that brash about the whole thing. I don't know. I would never wish it on myself if I had fallen.
I embarrassed myself in a I don't know if you call it a graveyard, the Chinese equivalent of a graveyard, and I for not acting, respectful enough. I was just doing what I would do in an English graveyard, but the Chinese are kind of in the opposite direction, where me just sort of being kind of interested in the names and the photos of these people in this sort of shrine was rude.
What did they
and I
want
was
you
told
to
off
do?
for it.
What do they want you to do? Like cry?
I think I was just taking a bit too much interest in why I'd been poking something.
in people's graves who you had no business being around.
But they weren't like graves. It was a kind of room with photos of people.
Bit of a cenotaph style thing then.
Yeah, but it was a very traditional style. It wasn't like a a war thing. I didn't want to derail your story. I was just it's interesting.
Okay.
It's not like the Americans are the worst. It's like we exist on a spectrum between the most polite, restrained people on Earth and the least.
Well, I think the thing that might be a part of it there is that the Chinese have a thing called ancestor worship.
Yeah.
So that might play into it. I mean, I'm not familiar with the protocols of Chinese burials and whatever, but I could only imagine that may play a part there.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so I've got the list of people he wants to put in the garden. I've put it in the stream chat. It's a big, long list of people.
Okay.
One of the hilarious parts is Frederick Douglass is actually one of them. So they'd be putting up a statue to him.
Huh.
Whenever I see his picture, I always hear the music from Ken Burns' The War documentary. I'm sure you know the music, even if you haven't seen it. It's on Netflix. Quite good, but he shows these pictures of things and zooms in. And Frederick Douglass was in the first episode, I believe. I'm confusing him with someone else because I'm racist.
You see, I think he's made a deliberate omission in this particular list.
Okay.
Because I could imagine.
Let me read the list so that people know what you're talking about first.
Let's just read the important ones, the controversial ones, I guess. So you've got George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Martin Luther King. So, pretty standard things.
Yep.
Martin Luther King's pretty nice. I like that. More modern ones that are controversial are Ronald Reagan, Antonin Scalia, and Billy Graham.
Billy Graham? Interesting.
Yeah. So the Ronald Reagan one makes sense to me. Like, he's quite modern now, I guess, but he's he's definitely an American hero in my mind. Defeating communism and all that.
Billy Graham is arguably the most prominent and influential theologian or evangelistic theologian, I suppose, of his era. But
didn't Hitchens used to call him like a charlatan and stuff?
Oh yeah, Christopher Hitchens hated him with a passion, and so did many Christians over here actually, because of his particular style and a lot of his rather more interesting beliefs, which none of which come to mind, but I've heard quite a lot about.
Antonin Scalia's not even dead, so I don't really get that one.
Antonin Scalia. Remind me.
The Supreme Court Justice.
That's right, yeah. It's nice to see others in there. Amelia Earhart.
Harriet Tubman.
Douglas MacArthur, I love that.
And that sort of thing. But anyway, who's missing from this list then, Brisha? You were just.
Well, isn't it obvious? I mean, if he has this garden of heroes,
is he going to put himself in there?
We can assume that it's going to be a sort of a circular fashion. So consider it something a bit like sort of a giant Stonehenge, but made up of statues. And then ask yourself, whose statue would stand in the very center, just
Trump.
3 times larger than everybody else and gilded?
Donald Trump.
The God Emperor himself?
Get that thing from Italy.
With the great big articulated claws.
Oh, the best part. We get all the circle of all these American heroes to be taking a knee.
I love all the memers in chat saying Epstein should be in there.
God.
Al Capone, Arnold Rothstein, No Kennedy, interestingly. Neither of them. Neither of the Kennedy.
There is a Frenchman, which is weird.
They're saying
But
Scalia is dead, by the way. Brett Kavanaugh took his spot.
What?
Ghislaine Maxwell. The entire cast of Spinal Tap. How about that? Any options? Any advances on this? British show, go on. Who is it then?
Theresa May, of course.
Theresa May in the centre of the American Heroes Garden. Why?
Well, I mean, if you want people from Spinal Tap,
if you're putting in fictional characters, you've got to have like a superhero, Captain America or a Batman.
AA definitely wants Ainsley Harriott in there, although he's a British hero, so we'd have to put one up of him over here. Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima.
I
actually really like Scalia, so I'm sad that he died. Just 4 years ago. Apparently, I'm the last person to know.
It's a bit awkward, that.
We're going to have a moment to talk about Ennio Morricone on a serious note.
Yeah, go for it.
Ennio Morricone has died, which is sad. But he was very old and he had a very full life, and we all love his music, I expect.
And I think he was it about a year ago he made the news by warning that if Hollywood wasn't careful, it would run out of people who could actually work with full set orchestras and make proper scores for films. Because he says he said at the time, if you look, you will find that there are about half a dozen people working who can do that, and that they're all getting rather old. And that, of course you can do electronic music and whatever, but it will never have the same range and the same power as having a proper orchestra do it. And he said, yes, that of the people who are, working on film scores these days, there are 6, I think he said at the time. And shortly after that, it was announced that one of them had died. So, yes.
It means that the person who composes the music has to be the one who conducts the orchestra as well.
Well, yes, but it also means that he can then make amendments and whatever. So, in a way, the orchestra is kind of his instrument. It's the way in which he, doesn't only conduct the orchestra but conducts himself. If you know what I mean.
I saw him conducting in. Sorry, I just wanted to humble brag here that we bought tickets to see him in the O2 Arena. Was it 5 years ago? That was really amazing. He's a tiny little Italian man. He accepted an award that he wasn't there to accept in person at the time, but they had a translator on stage because he doesn't speak English. Sweet little guy.
Well, I mean, to the public at large, I think he was kind of one of Siamese twins, wasn't he? Because everybody thinks of Ennio Morricone in the same breath as they think of Sergio Leone. Because those films, one can't really think of them without the music.
Yeah, I think he was the star of the show in many of Leone's films. Just as much as the writing or the
Well, it was. I think it's fair to say that in those films, particularly the later ones, that the music was almost like an additional character. I mean, so much so that in Once Upon a Time in the West, he went as far as pretty much giving every character their own signature tune.
And that's pretty par for the course in movie making, though. I don't know if it's a modern thing, but that's. I've
never seen it done to that extent. I mean, you may have sort of variations or whatever, or you may have, a sort of a little jingle or something like that. But he actually composed proper symphonic sets for each one of the characters. I think, except for the two gunfighters who needed to meet at the end, and they shared the same song, which was kind of symbolic, as in, obviously, these two will meet. There can only be one.
I know nothing.
The motif is more for their relationship to each other than it is for the individual characters. like Duel of Fates in it seems stupid, but yeah, John Williams is an excellent composer as well. But
I think we definitely need to stop on this because otherwise, I think we will kind of fry the synapses of not so obvious here because we're talking about films he hasn't seen.
Not to mention,
I'm talking about Phantom Menace.
I've seen Phantom Menace. Yes, obviously it's one of my favourite films of all time. The just to trigger as many people as possible.
One of the 4 films he has seen.
Oh, shut up, Mo. I don't think I've ever told a guest to just shut up, apart from the British. So consider yourself, I suppose,
You're now one of us, Poe.
one of those, one of the crew. I'm going to run into some super chats and also run through some of the sillier statue options as well that people have still been spamming into chat.
RoboCop.
Meghan Markle, Weird Al Yankovic, Jeff Goldblum. Yes, RoboCop's American.
Is that Jeff Goldblum as the Fly or as himself?
Mid-transition. Optimus Prime. Floyd George, of course. And more.
Alex Jones.
AA has said J.P. Morgan unironically and Henry Ford unironically.
Is that Alex Jones just as the figure, or Alex Jones as the person standing, atop a Humvee with a megaphone, traveling through the city centre?
He's stepping on top of a mountain of super male vitality cards.
No, of course. Sorry, yes.
So I'm going to run through.
A good shout.
Sutsgoen says, 271 seconds. May your tea taste of harbour water after soaking for 608,400 seconds. Apparently. Thank you, Sutsgoen, as always, for letting us know. EC90 says, hey Mark, buy a donut on me. Kanye 2020. Oh yes! I had forgotten for the last, half hour or so that Kanye had announced that he wanted to run in the presidential election. I just don't know. I wish I'd prepared with this because there's that poll which comes up and it says, who would you rather vote for, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, or Kanye West? And Donald Trump is just edging out the top of the votes. Biden is just slightly behind, and then everyone else is on Kanye. So it's sort of it's basically a 30-30-30 split.
3-horse race.
It's a 3-horse race between. You can just imagine the upset if people get so pissed off with Donald Trump and Biden as candidates because Donald Trump.
Then if Kanye doesn't win, he just announces live on television that the only reason they didn't vote for him because I is black.
Nah. What Kanye does is at the acceptance ceremony where President Trump is being sworn in for his second term of office, he walks up onto the stage, takes the microphone from the Donald, and talks about how Kim Kardashian is the most beautiful woman in the world and he should be president. Definitely feels like much more of the way they're going to do it. What would Kanye's campaign slogan be, though? It's just be like, I don't know, Kanye loves America as much as Kanye loves
If
Kanye.
anyone can, the Kanye can.
Oh no, British, no. It's a good thing you're not in advertising. Yes, but that's it's a great non-story because I think it's a bit late now for him to register, and I don't think he'll have massive clout.
Do you really think? Do you really think it's he doesn't stand a real chance? Are you really announcing that? Are you taking that step? Are you taking that risk?
Look, Brisha,
of being proven wrong.
Yeah, I am
actually taking the step of announcing that you don't think Kanye West will win the presidential election.
If Kanye West becomes president of the United States of America, I will eat my hat. It's as simple as that. Just take me at my word for that.
Is that your hat or Paddy Ashdown's hat?
What? It's my hat. No.
Someone in the chat will have got that reference, I'm sure.
Kanye's uncanny ability is only to deny Biden votes. Because the people on Trump's team know that Kanye met with Trump and is, pretty much a Trump supporter. He's just Black Trump, effectively, when it comes to the way he's seeing things in that way. So
it's official, people. According to Not So Obvious, Kanye West is Donald Trump's poodle.
No, he's just Black Trump.
You heard it here.
It's not poodle. It's just the same thing, same policy, same stuff.
I hope he wins.
Sorry?
I hope he wins.
You hope he wins. I don't know. I don't think he could handle it even necessarily as
Who
well
would
as
Kanye
Trump.
West's vice president be?
Kim, of course. She'd be both First Lady and his Vice President. But Kanye's power is to draw Democrat voters away from Biden and make it less of a two-horse race. That's what it is. It wouldn't even surprise me if Kanye had called Donald and been like, I'm going to do you a solid and enter the race at this point.
You want to see the black vote for the Democrats evaporate?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. But given that Biden is already an unpopular candidate, it's amazing how many Democrats as well are completely unaware that Kanye met Trump wearing a MAGA hat and shook his hand in the Oval Office, and got some photo opportunities in there. Or that they think...
Publicized event.
Sorry?
It was very widely publicized, wasn't it?
It was, but I've seen threads on Twitter of Democrat voters in absolute disbelief saying he's not a Republican. Have you heard his song lyrics? And then they post up these pictures and they're going, this must be fake. This must be Photoshop. This must be XYZ.
Do you remember that when he was sitting across from Donald Trump, he wanted to show Trump something on his phone and he unlocked his phone in front of the camera so you could see his password?
That's amazing. I like that. Kanye 2020. I'm going to see if I get some good images here. He hasn't actually taken any steps. He just said he was running for president. But yeah, this is.
So you mean to say he hasn't ordered his campaign plane yet?
Well, he may have done that, but
He's just to clarify, he's not running as a Republican. He's just running as Kanye, right?
Oh
He's
yes,
independent.
because he's not black. He's Kanye. He's not a Republican. He's Kanye. He's not a Democrat. He's Kanye. That's the way
He's a black Ross Perot.
No. Your references once again go over the head of the rabble, Britisher. I hope. I'm glad that you take amusement from it, because if Lord help us if it just frustrates you. Where was I? Right. Siskoan says, "Bacon for life. No regret, no apologies, no surrender." Oh yes, this is because I admitted on my Discord server, presumably, that my girlfriend is a vegan, and I'm probably going vegan / for most of the week anyway. At which point I get bombarded with a whole load of anti-vegan abuse. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Mighty Balzac says, "I wouldn't be caught dead in American Cemetery." It's the right attitude, man. Go for it. Mad Beast Yeti says, "Speaking of important people, ever going to bring back top trumps?" Well, Britisher, seeing as that's very much your ball game, I've never been invited or done a top trumps myself. How do you feel?
Who knows? I mean, it's possible. I think it would be a matter of getting our teeth into something interesting. You know, it has to have a theme. Otherwise, it's what was it? Churchill once said to someone who had prepared something. You know, he sort of said, "Dear madam, this pudding has no theme." You need something that ties it all together. Otherwise, it's just a matter of random people on cards. Incidentally, yesterday I had an interesting idea, which I sort of might float to the other two, and we'll see if something comes of it. But I could well imagine that we might,
I swear to God,
occasionally do something like that.
I swear to God, if it happens to be the unpopular opinions lineup top trumps, and I get put into the minion card position with level 1 stats across the board, I will not be pretty pleased, Richard. Just letting you know.
Well, it's an interesting idea. It's a concept worth exploring just for that alone.
You've already got the efficiency ratings. You're already, that's one column you can already fill in.
Yeah, I'll fill you all in if we do that. Anyway. But yes, so Mad Beast Yeti Top Trumps is on the table, but we don't know when or what topic. Just will happen at some point, presumably. Anna Quinn Cringe Walker says World Health Organization tip: a blast of Alex Jones' raw masculine rage has sufficient UV radiation to completely neutralize the Rona in your system. Thanks for that, Anna Quinn. And also says God Emperor Yeezy grants royal charter for first Mars colony to Elon Musk is now a sentence with a greater than zero chance of happening.
Good.
That's fantastic. I love that one. Right, so on to other news. We've had the Chinese ambassador warn the UK over interference in Hong Kong, and this comes in addition to the I think we both tweeted it out, didn't we, Brisha, earlier today, which was the... Where's it gone? The UK will face consequences if it rules China a hostile country, says Chinese envoy.
Yes, it was the Chinese ambassador who some time ago gave that rather memorable interview on, I think it was Hard Talk on the BBC, in which he did a lot of being combative. So one clearly had sent him on television to have a bit of a row. And yeah, it's an interesting one, telling you that if you think we're hostile, we're going to be hostile.
Yes.
Because
I mean, often people say that though. People really do talk like that.
I mean, most of this, I think, isn't really about Hong Kong. It's about Huawei. Because it looks now, particularly in the aftermath of Hong Kong, that Britain is going to take the step of telling Huawei to take a hike. And of course, if Britain does so, who knows what for an example that may set to others around the world. And one is doing a lot of sort of, one hasn't got much soft power, so one's trying to do it this way. One is doing a lot of stamping of feet, as in, don't even consider it, or else. But to me, I think we have long since now crossed the line. I mean, when they started having a go at Australia, do you remember they put tariffs on some crop of theirs, didn't they? And it was clearly a threat that they would put more tariffs on other goods. And that was after the United Nations, or was it the World Health Organization, had accepted that they were going to do an inquiry into COVID-19. And because that suggestion had come from Australia, the Australians got hit with a trade tariff. So this is a country that is behaving like no other in the world. They are just behaving like outright bullies.
They're behaving like if the communists had taken over the country. It's as simple as that. They know
a little like that.
They're
yes.
hypocritical, so they need to get just enough capitalism in there and state control in order to keep themselves afloat, because they know if they don't do that, they'll have a rerun of the Great Leap Forward.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I am fully sold on Cold War with China.
Yeah,
I know that.
I know. But
I know this would be enormously difficult to decouple the Western economy from China these days, but I think it's just necessary.
It's entirely necessary. I mean, China sees itself as the world hegemon, both socially, culturally, and economically. It sees America and the West as a thorn in its side, but no more. At the moment, really, it's quite happy to play the long game with us, because they know that if we're completely dependent on them, then we're just going to be dependent on them. And they do view us that way, just generally speaking. They also know that if push comes to... at the moment, they're studying our militaries with great interest, because they know that as a primarily land-based military, they really have the losing edge, because they don't have the naval or air superiority. But they know that if they get enough nuclear weapons, I mean, they have 260 warheads that we are aware of. If they get enough nuclear weapons, they'll be fine. And also, they can deal with us, because even if our defenses are 99% effective, 1% of over hundreds of nukes is still quite a lot.
Well, I mean, I think they... Sorry, go ahead.
The thing with nukes is that you don't even need to out-nuke your opponent. You just need to be, like, just having some nuclear weapons makes you almost not worth messing with, because the consequences are so awful. It almost doesn't matter how many you have, although, of course...
You say that, but if China was confident, having interacted both with Chinese officials and Chinese soldiers, and done some reading myself, of course, outside of my own personal experience, if China was confident that it could take us out with no real risk to itself, and by no real risk I mean losing only a little bit of collateral damage here or there, they would do it.
But there is no only a little bit when it comes to war.
You know, considering how many nukes the Americans have, and then you've got to add on all the NATO allies.
No, that's why they haven't.
I don't know why we're talking about this, because it's just not going to happen.
That's why they haven't attacked us already. That's as simple as that. So they have to pursue things by other means. Right?
It's like the Soviet Union, though. You know, if the US didn't have nukes during the Cold War, different situation.
So they get creative. So they created, I don't know if you remember a few years ago, they started creating these islands in the South China Sea.
Yeah, and I'm thinking if we're ever going to have a military conflict with them, that's probably the place. But it'll be a naval conflict. It won't be all out war.
No side can afford a world war.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is, I can't remember if it was Voltaire's Ghost, a great YouTuber, was pointing out, like, look, there is no military solution to this, so all we need to do is try and act like they're the Soviet Union again. Like, we can't take them on head on, but if you just isolate them and contain them, and hopefully the economy will turn to shit.
Well, they're already...
But that means one has to stop trading with them in the same way in which one didn't trade with the Soviet Union.
They're also 20 years ahead of us, if not more, in terms of the fact that they've already clocked that they've decided that they're going to be the economic aggressors, effectively. And that's why they can do that, with their more centrally planned economy. And incentivize these things and effectively force their country to turn itself to face the West, to infiltrate and put its tendrils everywhere that it can across Europe and America. And it's it's going to be difficult to not just extricate ourselves, but then after extricating ourselves, get to a point where we are then competing with a China which, realizing it's isolated, is entirely self-sufficient because it has all of the infrastructure and the manufacturing and a production capability and the trained populace.
They won't be self-sufficient, though. If you isolate them to that extent, they'll just end up like North Korea, where they can't get oil imports and whatnot. But I don't really think this is too much of a...
You can't isolate an eighth of the entire world like that, though.
Well, that's the thing. It's going to change, because if we're going to take our industrial needs elsewhere, I mean, India's right next door, Western focused, plenty happy to take the business.
Finally, Callum, recolonize India. You're right.
Yeah, I'm all on board for. Well, that's the thing. They were all on board for this. This isn't even my idea. I mean, they issued a statement saying, we'll take the production. You don't need to be doing this in China. And they're taking a real hard line on China, banning TikTok and whatnot. I don't see why we should not follow suit.
I mean, one of the things where you said, they will have the manufacturing and whatever. They only have the manufacturing as long as they have a market in which to sell the manufactured products.
Yeah,
exactly. The moment that you deny them a market, that manufacturing withers pretty quickly.
Look, my point: if you take something like, I know we don't have that many Chinese knockoff cars or something like that, but if Britain suddenly could no longer access any foreign market in order to produce its cars, none of the we have no great British car manufacturers left. Whereas China, for instance, being isolated, even if it was shipping thousands and millions of cars across to the rest of the world, would be able to then say, right, well, even if we have to shut down 90% of this because we're not selling to that market anymore, the physical infrastructure, the people who've worked in those factories, the experience and the technology and the trade lines that we have within our own country to produce these items still exists.
Oh, without a doubt. Yes, I'll grant you that. But we know that there is a big problem in China when it comes to technology. I mean, just look at sort of what they're doing regarding Russian jets and whatever. They just basically buy some Russian jets, then they copy them. I think the Chinese at the moment have got a stealth fighter of their own that actually is known to be a complete turkey.
Yes.
So...
Well, they did some fun stuff, like there were those two American jets which got shot down over, I think, near Bosnia, which then promptly couldn't be found by the locals, but suddenly the Chinese started producing tail fins, which looked an awful lot like the downed fighters.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't at all surprise me. But as I say, they're ripping off everything left, right, and centre. And
yes, they're very good at derivative innovation, but they're not very good at innovating in and of itself.
Precisely. So
there's no reason to do it.
They will end up with the factories, as you say, and with the design teams and the engineers and whatever. That's completely correct. But 10 years from now, how far would they then have they evolved the technology, if you know what I mean? And I know this sounds very much like someone talking down their nose, trying to make out that all Chinese are stupid. That's not what I'm saying. This is a known problem to the Chinese themselves. I remember seeing an interview once with a professor at a Chinese university whose speciality was precisely this: that the trying to get his country to kind of embrace innovation. And
yes, they have a great pride in doing it exactly as their ancestors did, and no different.
He was he was pretty despairing in what he was saying in that interview, as in how difficult it was, and how it was urgently necessary to change the mindset, but that he didn't really see how that would be accomplished. It's not a question of intelligence; it's a question of mentality.
Yes, entirely. Everyone I've ever spoke to in education, whenever they've taken on Chinese students, talks about how they can, especially music, interestingly. So my old piano teacher, she used to say to me, she said, well, I've got this Chinese student, and it's a real pain trying to teach them anything, because you can tell them, you can play something for them, and they will reproduce it for you very, very quickly. And then you try and teach them to put emotion into it, and they don't know what you're talking about, because it requires a little bit of innovation, even if it's just a little bit, to just alter the way in which you're hitting the keys, or the tempo in which you're playing, or the particular way you make the piece flow. And this is a real problem, because all the later grades in musical education in this country require innovation. You can't just play something. So she found that the only way that she could make it work was to play them a piece of someone performing something with emotion, and then they would mimic the emotion as they played, and that was the only way to get them through.
So I don't know if you watch Winston or Lao Wai. They're two. So one's American, one's South African, and they've both gone to China. And for like 15 years, they've been making YouTube videos. Right. Sorry, not 15, obviously, but for quite many years, we're making YouTube videos. And the videos have always been sort of on the edge of criticizing, but in a nice way, about the Chinese system. And both of them, like the last few months, have both decided, screw this, we're leaving China because it's turning horrible.
Are these the ADV China guys?
No, I haven't. But these guys both noted in their videos of them leaving that exact problem with students, how the way the schooling system works is essentially repetition, which is great and all, but they said at the university level, you get to the point where you're told you can't fail students. Like, they literally couldn't fail anyone because it would make the university look bad. So, like, Winston was teaching people to be doctors, and he couldn't fail them So it's just a farce. There is no creativity. There is no teaching people to do that kind of thing. And I believe this was the same problem in the Soviet Union. So, I mean, all we have to do is just get to that state we're agreeing on, where we have to isolate them and keep them as, essentially Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union, where we don't interact with them because it's wrong. The biggest problem is just waking up, surely, which I think we're starting to do, because I saw on the BBC earlier today that the government's thinking about banning Huawei from the UK.
Yeah, that's a positive start.
Well,
although
one of the things I saw in sort of a documentary some time ago in which they spoke to some of the leading figures around the time in America when Trump took on the presidency, and it kind of transpired from there that very many of the sort of security advisors, both Democrat and Republican, they were gradually coming round to a different stance on China. And one of the things that was particularly influential were the companies. So all these big multinational companies who had always urged the American government to, allow them to open up and go into China, and they now suddenly were changing their tune because they were being ripped off for copyright at such a ridiculous degree that they were now looking to the US government for protection and were beginning to say, look, hang on, this can't continue. We are basically being blackmailed, that we're being told if we want access to the Chinese market, we need to hand over our trade secrets.
Yeah.
And this is not acceptable. It's the only thing that's keeping us in the race. And slowly, I mean, once the corporates were on board, and of course the military had always been somewhat suspect of the Chinese, it seems that already, 3 years ago, really, the worm was turning in certain, among certain ranks in Washington. So I think, as such, there is something happening, but I think it will take time before it kind of filters through the whole system. I'm not sure whether the British have actually got the memo yet, if you know what I mean.
The only place I know of, and Enigmatic in chat is saying, do you not think we should start prohibiting Chinese and other enemy? Enemy, it's a Cold War, so we can't. Anyway, prohibiting Chinese and other enemy national officer candidates from Sandhurst and Perisher, etc. The only force which has got the memo is the Air Force, because, as I've told people before, whilst I was going through initial officer training, we had Chinese recruits, and it turned out they were spending all of their spare time at the missile installation facility down the road, 81% of their time, actually, outside of office hours. And
they must have had very good ping-pong tables around those missile
they also kept
abilities.
they were very generous. They gave everyone gifts of USB sticks and encouraged them to use them on their work devices and that sort of thing.
So nice.
And we basically said, we got people together and said, these people are spies. At which point we were told off by the MOD for our cultural intolerance, and this seminal program, which was designed to foster international relations, could not be derailed by us accusing them of being spies. We were told to be less racist. Of course, as soon as they had graduated, or gone into the second term, the Secret Service, the MI5, effectively, were keeping tabs on them, GCHQ and whatnot. And as soon as they left, they immediately departed back to China, where it turned out, of course, that they were not new recruits. They were high-ranking officials in the intelligence branch of the Chinese government, and that they were then being drafted to a missile defense facility. And we have probably received a short and nowhere near comprehensive apology for the way we'd been treated. But
all I can say is that MI5 sound terribly racist to be keeping tabs on them.
Yeah. So I know it's a story I've told several times, but there are some people who are waking up, but the civil service, the government, and the normies need to wake up. That's the truth of it. A little bit like Huawei, I guess, kind of There was
Well,
no,
I think
there was no kind of big uproar when they announced that the next nuclear power station was going to be primarily Chinese. There was a little bit of an outcry, but no one really mentioned anything. And then when it was Huawei, and I think it's because two things. The first is Huawei is a very well-known manufacturer now. I know at least a dozen people who have Huawei phones. But secondly, America has had this big tiff with Huawei, which is why their latest models, for instance, don't have Google Play on them, or any Google services whatsoever. So, it's something which has affected the basic way in which people use their products. And so, of course, they're like, oh, well, what is this going on with Huawei here? Oh no. They're in bed with the Chinese government, because how could they not be? And they're actually going to be responsible for an awfully large part of our national infrastructure. Should we really be allowing them to do that? But that's what needs to happen. Is the idiots at Whitehall need to wake up. That's my biggest thing from it.
one of the problems is these sort of grand doctrines that countries embrace. Every few decades they change their stance. And when it comes to China, there has been this long-standing doctrine in the West that if only we allow them to embrace the free market and, trade with us, then sooner or later they will mellow and become more democratic and more liberal society. And of course, we can see, full right, this has not happened. But the doctrine is still there, and everybody is still operating according to that doctrine. But at some point, the shift needs to come. Somebody actually needs to be the next big figure, most likely the American president, to basically say, okay, right now we're changing course. This ends here. And then you can have another such moment. So I think much of it goes back to Nixon with, his opening up towards China, but also with Clinton, who then kind of doubled down on a lot of the opening up with China and allowing investment into China and so on. And there hasn't been, Trump has been making noises, but there has not been that sort of big moment in which there is sort of the official stance, with him signing documents and whatever, in which the doctrine is officially changed. And I think that's the thing that everybody's waiting for. Because
the new era begins.
Yes, precisely. Something that is kind of set out for the long term, not for my presidency or whatever, but for the long term. This is what we're going to do for the next 20, 30 years. But that, of course, also requires a certain amount of consensus. And that's why I was referring to, when the BBC were interviewing these folks, they were talking to sort of advisors from the Democrat side as well as the Republican side. And there appeared to be some sort of consensus among them at the time. Whether that would still be here today, given how the two tribes hate each other and cannot possibly be seen to agree with each other on anything, that's another matter. But there is no point a president trying to to sort of change the long-term stance of the United States of America if it cannot possibly be long-term because the other side don't agree with it and will change it at a moment's notice.
Yeah, I guess part of the reason we're waiting for this big moment that's not going to come will come eventually, but hasn't yet, is that as soon as you make that big shift, then China makes a shift. Like, you want to, like Voltaire's Ghost was saying, you've got to slowly untangle yourself before we're able to actually fully act as we need to. But I wanted to say this story that I learned from Lawai that was quite funny. So you mentioned how no one really knew what Huawei was, and now they do. So I got in my YouTube feed advertisements from them trying to argue that they have no links to the CCP, and they're a privately owned company and all the rest of it. And then what was funny is at the same time, when America was banning them and whatnot, and now we're thinking about banning them, they decided, okay, you know what, we're gonna fight back, and we're gonna fight back with a PR campaign where we'll have government accounts and government propaganda pump out that we stand with Huawei, and have people with pieces of paper that said, I stand with Huawei. And then they realized, having the government side with Huawei probably doesn't make it look like Huawei has no links to the government. We ought to stop this. And the campaign was scrapped.
But as I say, to come back to it, I think their I think they've got separate channels of their own, haven't they? But I think they've got that channel called ADV China, isn't it? Is Winston and what was the other guy called? You say
They probably do. They do a lot of stuff together. Lao Wai is.
I think
channel.
their sort of staple some time ago was kind of traveling around China on motorbikes.
Yeah.
And they had microphones in their helmets,
motorbikes.
And I think some time ago they left China really and started traveling around Vietnam and places like that. Because yes, they were saying that things were really toughening up in China for foreigners, and that the sort of easygoing time of the past 10 years or so had passed, and that therefore they'd had enough of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've been moving for a long time, and now it's just that they fully moved to the US. So they've made videos calling out all the stuff that they weren't able to call out before.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the big things they made is it's literally just President Xi's new regime, like the way he acts like a new Mao and all the rest of it. But I think we talked about China enough.
He now has his own school of thought, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So now there is such a thing as Shiism.
It wouldn't surprise me at all. Right.
Do you want to talk about those crime statistics?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Back when we started this thing, we were talking about crime statistics. Right. Just run us through where we're up to with this again, and Callum.
Have you got the link up?
I have got it up. It's being displayed right now.
Okay, yeah. So it's just the most interesting things, identity-wise, I guess. So for gender, let's get this. So the population of females is 4% now, down from 17% in 1900. Oops, sorry.
Where was it?
What page is this on? I will link it in.
No, I sent you my tweet because I just got out I'll send the tweet to all of you then. Because it's just the best bit, so you don't have to look through the whole bloody report.
I see.
Got it. Sorry, we're derailing you. Continue.
Just sending it to everyone, so they've got it.
Let's have a look. See.
There we go. So gender, 95% of people in prison being male in Britain, which not really eventful, but it's always good to remember. The religious one is where it gets strange. So Christians make up 61% of the population in 2020, 47% of the prison population, so they're underrepresented. So the Christians
by
not
over 10%.
Yep. And then the next one is Muslim. General population 4%, prison population 16%. So that's an 8% increase since 2002.
And I still reckon that they haven't got nearly enough of them.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, that clearly shows that the courts are biased.
Yeah, I mean, that's the two interpretations of that piece of data. But it's a 4 times overrepresentation, so it's not a nothing burger. It's very 1350. But the next one is what proves the difference here, which is that Hindus make up 2% of the population, but statistically 0% of the prison population. You know, it's just so low, it's not even 1% yet. But the reason that's so interesting to me is that both of those groups mostly come from the Raj. So I don't know if it'll come up on your screens, but I commented below. So you've got Bangladeshi and Pakistani are the two major Muslim groups of the UK. And they're more than 50% of the UK's Muslims. But both of those groups are from the former Raj.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true for the Hindus. 95% of our Hindus come from the former Raj. So it's just demolishing this idea that it's genetics which make up the crime. Like, it's obviously culture. Because you can talk about the 1350 thing in the US with black folks all you want, but these two groups, the only thing that divides them really, because their genetics are very similar, as I understand, is the culture difference. And lo and behold, these crime statistics are what they are.
People are asking about the Sikhs. I think they're just 1% for 1%, aren't they?
Yeah, so they're perfectly
I can see. In line.
Average.
Yeah, one for one. So in line with what they should be in terms of, population-wise. But
yeah, I mean, you've got.
And so the weird thing, like the whole thing that really pisses me off with crime statistics is they'll talk about how it's Islamophobic bigotry, right? That's meaning that Muslims are 16% of the population whilst only being 4%, and also white people are being disproportionately benefited and let off because they only make up 47%, right? So there's this kind of reverse, this kind of positive racism towards white people and this
the outcomes are what important,
which is
not how they got there.
Not how they got there, right? Whilst completely ignoring the fact that if you do have a group which disproportionately does more crime than its sector, then that's going to bring down the percentage for every other group. If Muslims only committed 4% of the crime, in line with their general population, then that extra
that white percentage would go back up.
That extra 12% has got to be distributed across all the other groups effectively, because the sample size has just gone down, and the data has changed. But it's really irritating because any disparity gets touted as evidence that something must be wrong. And it just reminds me of that really irritating slide at an APA conference, I think it was, the American Psychiatric Association, which said that bigotry is ascribing any other reason to statistical disparities other than systemic racism. And I just thought it was unreal.
The one other thing there that's great for destroying that is the no religion section. So the atheists are overrepresented in the crime statistics. So if anyone does want to make the argument that, this proves that Muslims are being unfairly treated, well, okay, then atheists also are then.
We clearly,
that's the point.
Did you not see when Boris Johnson went and kissed the hand of the Pope and invited him to take his seat as the rightful in his rightful place as the head of the Christian theocracy that is Britain?
I can't tell if you're joking or not.
I am joking. Yeah,
okay.
We don't live in a Christian theocracy. It's ludicrous. Obviously,
just in my mind, I could imagine Boris sending a article like that for a laugh.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's ridiculous.
Let's go on to the ethnicity one. So the ethnicity one is pretty much the same as most of the other planet. So you do get a little bit of 1350 here, which means that the Black, Asian, and mixed groups, and also other, are overrepresented, whereas the white group is underrepresented. And then below I've got Scotland, where the exact same trend takes place. I think there's a couple that buck it. But it's difficult with Scotland because it's practically an ethno-state. So the minority groups are... they have to be zoomed in on the image because there's just so few.
Did you watch the thing in the SNP Parliament the other day, which was supposed to be a debate?
They're upset that Scotland's 99% white or whatever, and
they got their one brown MP or whatever. I can't remember his name, talking about how everyone was white there. It's like, dude, you make up less than 1% of the population.
We all watched Sargon's video on it.
Did Sargon do a video on it? I don't think I saw that one.
He spent a whole day just watching them in Parliament and cutting it up, and he was just like, I had a whale of a time. Like, I don't know how. Fucking nuts.
He loves all that stuff, though. Bless him.
Well, it's always good to get them honest. That's the thing. It's like when I sat down and watched the Labour Party conference for 4 days to clip out what they were up to. And then you can show people, look, this is what they are. It's not the guy at your door. This is the ideology that's going to be in government.
Listened to I don't know if it was Unpopular Opinions or a cigar stream where AA went through the Labour Party leaked WhatsApp chat to see what the Labour Party was really saying behind Jeremy Corbyn's back.
Oh, that was so funny. Just especially with some of the higher ranking people. I have her face in my mind, and I got Emily Thornberry and stuff like that, and just the amount of abuse that they were hurling at just their members and the different factions in there, and how were they going to... Ridiculous. Yeah. It's good quality cringe, that. It's good quality. Sorry?
While we were talking about China, I did wonder whether we were going to bring up the story of the TikTok girl who got fired from work and was crying about it. Did anyone see the story?
Oh, this is the one who, really sanctimoniously, condescendingly put out a TikTok, basically saying if the next person who says all lives matter to me is going to get stabbed.
Yes.
And it turns out this is not her first inflammatory TikTok. There is apparently about 18 others that the company highlighted when they let her go. But she got let go and then posted a second TikTok, which was basically her in absolute tears talking about how could this bigoted, misogynistic, sexist, racist company do this to her.
How could it happen to me?
I think you ought to mention that not only did she say that the first, the next person to say all lives matter should get stabbed. She mentioned that the next person that should show the outright caucasity.
Oh, this is a word that has just appeared in the lexicon, and I hate it.
Is it just audacity with the word cock in it, or is it actually something else?
It's Caucasian audacity.
And what's the chap called? It's the bearded Canadian lawyer chap who does videos, and I caught a video of his on this subject, and he said he actually went and looked it up because he thought this must surely just be made up, and apparently it isn't. Apparently this is something that's been going, that's been going around a bit for a few years in we all know what for academic literature. What? So apparently this is a proper word. It's not one she just made up. But when I say it's a proper word, it's a word they made up.
It is used in the same way that the term equity was purely
or phallocentric. Yes.
No. But equity was purely a legalistic term. And it was used in terms of proprietary matters. But it was then equality and equity were then mixed up and changed and turned into academic language, and now equity and equality are very much standard academic lingo. But caucasity is not one that I've come across, interestingly, in all of my reading.
But apparently it's been around a bit in certain a literature of a certain type. Let's put it like that.
It's interesting because I've had to do a lot of reading on domestic violence for my thing. I will bring this back round. I've had to do a lot of reading on domestic violence for a study that I'm running at the moment, and the gender studies papers on domestic violence are the most scientifically and, to be perfectly honest, just linguistically illiterate things I have ever had the misfortune to have had to read. But it's when these things are cited in papers which are actually scientific as the basis for their hypotheses, granting them some legitimacy. But when you actually go in and read these papers, and it's basically, you're waiting for them to state a hypothesis, they never do it. Once they've done it, you expect them to describe their methodology, which is just, in many cases, I ran an analysis on. But they don't describe what kind of analysis or what their boundaries were or anything that we would expect. Every single one of these papers would fail their undergrad statistics 1 class, and yet these things are informing policy, and it drives me mental. Sorry, back to where we were.
I forgot. Yes, the TikTok.
Yes.
I wanted to mention. The British is not going to play devil's advocate here. I feel like I have to. The TikTok in question, if you haven't seen it, Bill was making a very crude point about all lives matter, saying that she would stab somebody who said such a thing, and then compare it to her paper cut, saying that all cuts matter. Her cut was just important just as important as your stab wound. So, but using this as the point, and
I hate this metaphor because it's happening all the time. In the same way that we had someone put up on Facebook the other day, when people say "save the whales," nobody says "all fish matter." And first of all, I said whales aren't fish. But secondly, you're talking about the fact that, first of all, you've got to prove that they're in worse shape. You can't. You can say, well, we need to save the whales because look, we've got all these Japanese whaling fleets that are literally killing them. These are their population numbers, and they keep going down. And also these are their feeding grounds, which we've used for fisheries, and it means that they can't migrate in the right places, so they're not breeding the same way, right? Those you could give those. These are just hypothetical examples. They may or may not be real. Doesn't matter. The point is that I found 3 things with tangible evidence that you could probably use to justify that claim. When it comes to the black community, you have to talk about everything, and they'll only talk about the outcomes. They'll only talk about black people are underrepresented in universities, and when they're at universities, they're underperforming. If black people are disproportionately targeted for stop and search and for police action, and are disproportionately represented in criminal institutions, prisons, and rehab centers and stuff like that. And they never address the underlying reasons. They just say it's racism because they can't talk about causal or factors, because it's like each one of these things will have a myriad of causes. The fact that black people are overrepresented for their population but not for their crime, interestingly, in prison systems, is directly related to the fact that they commit more crimes. They commit more crimes is entirely related to various numbers of factors, from socioeconomic status to fatherlessness in the black community to cultural issues to ganglands, glorification, and all this sort of stuff, which is refused to be done. It's like black people are more at risk of coronavirus. That's because they're more likely to be impoverished, they're more likely to have a poor diet, more likely to be obese, they're more likely to be in places with other respiratory diseases, more likely to smoke, they're more likely to be raised in a household with damp or other conditions in the house, which mean that they're more prone to disease in general, and they're less likely to abide by social distancing rules because, for instance, the Muslim population is primarily black, and they didn't care about it because they're highly religious and they believe that their God will save them. Another factor of poverty is the fact that they're living in social housing. This is often quite cramped. They also tend to live in generational housing, depending on where they come from. This is not just African Americans. This is Indians, Nigerians, and whatnot, with a generational collective living standard. And I appreciate that I've just listed a whole load of things, but nobody has mentioned any of those things, or how much they're weighted, or how much that they individually contribute to the problem. They've just slapped racism on it because that's easy, and made it into a univariate thing where they can justify whatever they want to do, with the allegation that they're going to use it to combat racism, with no need for evidence that their intervention works, with no evidence that their policy does things. In fact, the fact that they're parroting 3 or 4, specifically in America, they're called Democrat policies, which have been demonstrably disastrous for the areas in which they've been implemented, drives me absolutely nuts. The absolute lack of a conversation. They keep saying, we've got to have the conversation. We've got to have the conversation about racism. It's like, well, bring your statistics, bring your facts, bring your examples, bring your empiricism to this, because you cannot solve the issues that you may be well highlighting, which are real issues for the black community, for lack of a better term. Not that I think that such a thing really exists in this country, but if you want to have the conversation, you need to have a dialogue, and if you don't have a dialogue, then nothing's going to happen. And the only way in which you can deal with it is through your violent revolution, in which you blank slate the entire country. And I'm sorry, but I'm not prepared to let that happen. And I'm aware that I've just been ranting for about 5 minutes.
Yeah, don't worry about it. But I guess we wait for the Trevor Phillips review to come out of what caused it, and then we'll know. But I thought it's great pointing out the univariate thing, though. There was an even funnier take that Cole heard from his next door neighbor. He was arguing that the NHS is racist because more black people are dying from COVID, and it's just like this is garbage. This is fucking garbage. But that's the level of debate you're talking about.
Sorry, people are saying, I think facetiously, we can win this with facts and logic. That's not what I'm saying at all. My point is that they are claiming to come with facts and logic when they are not. They are claiming to come with some kind of scientific empirical backing which gets the normies on side. And it is getting the normies on side because half the normies are stupid and don't know what they're looking at, and the other half are just lazy and won't do their research. So
they are coming with a fact.
they're coming with a fact, but
Precisely.
they're not coming with logic, and they're not coming with facts plural, and they're not coming with a good thing. So the idea is to not give this the ground it's worth on. So you set the terms. You don't allow them to set the terms. If they're going to be violent, you say you're breaking the law, you're going to prison. If they're going to disobey laws about... because peaceful protest is exactly that, peaceful, with all the restraints that comes with it. If they don't peacefully protest, then they get put away, and they should feel the full arm of the law. They should be dispersed if the riots are seen to be getting out of control. If they pull down public property, the people who are responsible, the people who had their hands on the rope, should be found, fined, or imprisoned. The statues should go straight back to where they are until they are willing to actually sit down and have a proper conversation. And so that requires having a spine, having a backbone, and being able to put your foot down when it's necessary. Because you can't just say to a screaming mob, "Oh, come here with facts and logic, read Thomas Sowell." As much as I have a T-shirt which says "Read Thomas Sowell," and you should definitely buy it. What you can do is be strong enough to put the foot down and say, "We're not having this," effectively, and you will be held to the full extent of the law until you stop behaving like infantile children and actually discuss this on an adult basis. And this is one of the great things which I hate about the current educational system, the higher educational system, and postmodernism itself in particular, because they've done away with the methodology, and there's this really irritating statement, which is that no slave was ever freed by discussing his position with his captor, or something to that effect. And I would say that that's just an entirely false equivalence to what we have in the West at the moment, and until they're willing to deal with that, then there's nothing that can be done for them. And they can either deal with what they have currently, they can talk about the problems that they have and how they wish to have them solved, or they can get out.
Just come up with a new meme, just with British as fact. It's like, it's not facts, don't care about your feelings. Just some BLM guy being like, fact, don't care about your feeling. Like just pointing at the one outcome. And, I mean, that's the left, isn't it? Just point at the outcome and say, this is a fact. I don't care about your feelings. This is a problem. But should we move on to the next topic? Because
yes. Speaking of David Starkey.
What do you think of his apology? Let's do that.
Well, he apologized for saying damn blacks.
Yeah.
That was the thing.
So there was that, which, okay, I can accept that, fine, whatever, But there was the ending bit of him talking about multiculturalism and how he loves it that was weird. I'm just like, this isn't you. Like, you wouldn't write this. Starting to make me think like it's more of a hostage video than a official apology.
I don't know. I can tell he's exasperated through it. It's probably the most exasperated he's got. I think because he just has no time for such a spurious claim. As for the multiculturalism stuff at the end, I can't say I paid much attention to it. But
it's probably, I feel the whole thing's probably crowd pleaser. So just put any old shit in it, But
it's an apology.
Yeah.
But in terms of his apology, it's one of those things where, it's clearly, if you look at it in the context of the clip as well, it's clearly his exasperation's got the better of him, and he's said, damn, which is just, I think, more him wanting to say an expletive and not being able to.
No, I mean he's being humorous. Obviously, he's got that little condescending attitude that he always has when he's
beamery.
Yeah.
And he's not wrong either with the statement. His framing of damn blacks is obviously unfortunately they've allowed to basically eclipse his message.
Well, I still say that he actually didn't do anything wrong. I'm surprised to hear, I had not heard this yet today, that he had apologised, because he doesn't have anything to apologise for. Because I know full well what the damn was. I mentioned it in the week that was. We have all, when, speaking without scripts and whatever, we have all used expressions like that.
Made a
Because-
social faux pas.
Well, and no, that's just it. It's not a social faux pas because effectively what he is referring to is the theory doesn't work because of the damn evidence. Well, in this case, who is the evidence? It's the blacks.
You're right, but because there is room to misunderstand that, and
Yes, there is
have
room for misinterpretation, but that's just it. It is the interpretation that is being made of it, which is being taken as, oh, this is therefore racist. Well, yes, but there are other ways in which you could look at it, which aren't straining in order to try and keep him from culpability. It's
we don't
to
like
me.
it.
To me, it's fairly obvious that is the spirit in which it was said, and therefore it has nothing racist about it, and therefore no apology is required.
I think that's charitable, and I think that's accurate. But I think there is, to a certain extent, you need to speak. And we all need to be responsible for our words, to make sure that we are not misunderstood. Be careful about what we say, so that people can't take. I mean, there's a limit, obviously. You can't protect yourself completely.
This was
But
pretty
you
much an
can-
hour-long interview, and the section which was offensive was what, 3 or 4 seconds?
Just saying, I would not have said that. I would have made that phrase ahead in my mind and thought, okay, maybe don't put an expletive exactly there. That's I would.
Yeah, well, that's the point of the apology. Part of the apology was him saying, I wish I didn't say that word, obviously. But what I'm more interested in is how Cambridge responded to this, because they defended the white lives don't matter academic on the basis of academic freedom, which I'm all for. I mean, she's fucking crazy. Like, there's loads more stuff of her being nuts than just that one tweet. But fine, okay, we're going to defend her on academic freedom. But they buckled immediately on Starkey. And they just went, no, not dealing with this. Throw him to the wolves.
Yeah.
I mean,
they're committed to diversity of thought,
Yeah, I mean, it's very diverse up there.
It's amazing that obviously them making their big grandstanding about being, being in favour of academic freedom and whatnot, came so soon before the next deplatforming, effectively. The thing is, because they talk about, the people are getting really irritated in the comments, because some people are saying, oh, he's 75 and he lost his honorary degree. He's not lost anything really. And it's like, he's been stripped of basically every honor he's ever been given in his entire life. Like, that's for saying the word damn in the wrong place, where if you examined it with any kind of civic context, he's got so many awards, this man, that if they didn't strip him of one, like, they wouldn't know. So this is something which has been done by these institutions purely to make a statement of throwing him under the bus anyway, and possibly for their own publicity. But it's infuriating, like his book, his royalties, his publisher won't talk to him. Obviously that's his primary income in his older age, as well as these interviews and that sort of thing. And it's just such a shame to see a man's entire life's work destroyed and effectively erased, because no bookshop's going to stock his book now in an act of solidarity against racism. Even though it was just this one little thing, and he's not racist. And it's also completely against the left. Talks again. It's hypocrisy. It's always projection with the left, right? It's a hypocrisy of constantly wanting rehabilitative justice, and at the same time having dragging out someone's tweets or someone's message from 33 years ago, an article they wrote, and having absolutely no tolerance for forgiveness. They've got no forgiveness in them whatsoever. Yes?
I think we agree with you.
Yeah, I'm also watching this debate Carl's having at the same time, so it's a bit difficult.
I see. Well, I'll run through a couple more super chats. Mad Beast Yeti says, "Wow." Thank you very much, Mad Beast Yeti. Mad Beast Yeti says, thoughts on Cannes UK from the UK perspective. Cannes UK. CANZ UK. The theoretical, political, and economic union of Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, of course, yeah. In an international body similar in scope to the former EEC. I really have very little opinion on the idea of Cannes UK, to be honest. Cannes-uck. Any thoughts from the panel?
Well, I mean, if it's an economic body of some sort that doesn't really restrict, free trade too much, I mean, it would have to, it could only exist if it would be some sort of internal market. The question then is, what does it restrict you from doing? But if it would be some sort of market in which they give each other preferential treatment, but it doesn't end up with, in that case we have to have tax harmonization, and we have to have this, and we have to have the other, and and eventually you end up with, EU light. If it would be something like that, then I'm sure one could talk about it.
It reminds me of the South Park episode where they take down the Walmart. Have any of you seen that episode? They stab.
What, Whole Foods or something, or is that a different Walmart?
No, older. The heart of the Walmart. The Walmart comes to town and absorbs all their deals, put everyone else out of business. And all the townsfolk, Randy gets a job there, and so they have to go and find the heart of the Walmart. It's a bit of a Matrix Revelations parody. And they basically say, we should burn it down at one point in the episode to stop ourselves from shopping there. So they burn down the Walmart, and it comes back the next day, and then they have to kill it off again. And then at the end, they say, we'll support local business, and they support the local business so much that it grows into a giant corporation, and they end up burning it down again. It's just this endless cycle of just burning down these chain supermarkets.
As a counter reference, it reminds me of the episode of Rick and Morty where they go to the Purge planet, and the people on the Purge planet overthrow the elites that are making them do the Purge, and they have to.
And they have another purge. They've worked out purge.
They have to decide on what their new political system will be, and then within those 30 seconds they decide to do the purging again.
Yeah, so it's just this idea of like we burn down the European Union in order to establish the new European Union, and then in 50 years time we have to burn down Cannes UK because it's become the new EU, and then we're like, what should we do? Well, we've got these other people in Europe who we haven't traded with in a while. Let's form a new European Union, shall we call it? And just the cycle completing, I don't know, in that sense. Funny time. Walter the Einstein Frog says, Brahmin caste Hindus and Muslims are absolutely different groups genetically. I don't know anything about that. Callum?
I'm sorry, what? I was watching the stream.
Brahmin caste Hindus and Muslims are absolutely different groups genetically.
That would be news to me. My understanding is that's largely bollocks, but if I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
My understanding is that Brahmins are almost white in complexion. That there would be some difference that would be causing that, or at the very least.
I don't know. JS says BLM just toppled. Oh, for goodness sake, you can tell it's late, can't you? BLM just toppled Haile Selassie's statue in Wimbledon.
What?
Let's have a look here. Statue. Wimbledon.
Commenting on the news.
Yes, just 5 years ago. 5 days ago. Haile Selassie's statue is destroyed in Wimbledon's Cannizaro Park, thought to be linked to unrest in Ethiopia after a singer was shot dead. Yes. A group of 100 people destroyed the statue.
Seems to be a new sort of language, doesn't it? We communicate with each other by smashing up each other's statues.
You just get pieces of it posted to you. That's what it is. Let me see.
Oh, yeah, that was something funny. Did you see the thing they found inside the Edward Colston statue?
They found inside it?
Yeah.
Was it a small, wrinkled skeleton of an African child?
No. They found I think it was a newspaper or a magazine from the date it was erected. So the workers seemingly had just shoved it inside or shoved it on the side of it or whatever, and it had been forgotten about. And they pulled it out and they were like showing it off on this government site, showing what they found. And just right on the back, there was a massive sexist joke about how women are stupid. And I was just like, oh, for fuck's sake.
Another time.
Classic times.
It's a magic trick, isn't it?
Well, it's like a time capsule, isn't it? Matchstick says, good rant. Thanks, Matchstick. And Hikari Manakaniko says, if you gave me 6 lines written by the hand of the most honest of men, I will find something in them with which to hang him. Richelieu. Thank you for that, Hikari. Yes, it's definitely the case that no one is perfect. All are fallible. All will be destroyed. I mean, all are fallible. Yes.
If you talk for long enough, you can make anything. You can make anything true, basically. If you get the right kind of intellectual to write an essay on the subject, you can make any statement that sounds obvious. You make it false and
not so obvious.
Make anything that's obviously false sound true.
Yeah. Right. What else was I going to cover this evening? We have
an 8-year-old kid. I didn't really understand that one still.
Oh yes. So this is the. In fact, whilst we're on statues, actually, I will, and kind of then tangentially BLM. The actress behind the BLM rally in Whitehall has disowned Black Lives Matter UK. So, Iman Ayrton, who I've never heard of before, said she was behind 2 Black Lives Matter protests in London. She believes that the BLM movement has been hijacked by far-left activists. Claims BLM UK, a campaign group, is now the forefront of the movement, and that they used a skillful social media campaign to do this. She voiced fears that people may have been donated towards a high-profile online fundraising campaign without realising that those behind it want to tear down capitalism and abolish the police. Who could have seen this coming? Who could have seen this coming?
This new backlash against Black Lives Matter as an organisation was a real relief to me, because I thought that there was nothing that people would stand up for. That they would really just go along with anything that Black Lives Matter told them to do, and
because of their
they
name.
They were so afraid of being racist that they would stand up to. They would completely lie down and just do whatever they were told by their black overlords. And the fact that even though they're pushing back on only the most
it was when they were calling, like, BLM stands were calling people bootlickers, whilst they were literally licking the boots of or kissing the boots of black people whilst they were kneeling in Parliament Square. It was insane. The amount of cultural cuckoldry, I suppose you call it, going on was just ridiculous.
Yeah. But, that we've proven that there is a line. People actually aren't in favor of Marxism when they find out that this is
one of the things I was really interested to find out, even amongst American contemporaries, is that they both sides of, like, the anti-commie sentiment is still strong in America, and amongst the Democrats, the vast majority who said they wouldn't vote for Bernie voted on the grounds that he was promoting socialism, not because of anything else. Just they don't like socialism. Even the Democrat voters don't like socialism, even when they're the primary pundits for the Democrat Party are calling for it. It's ridiculous.
I don't know if it's their education system or just their culture, but they're maybe it's just indoctrination and it's more brainless going along with it. But maybe they've got a slightly more anti-Marxist brainwashing than we do here in this country.
I don't know. It's all very strange. And also, I thought it was interesting because this article of them calling out, the Black Lives Matter organization, in the same sort of time frame, Keir Starmer has walked back himself and several brands have just quietly distanced themselves by removing Black Lives Matter either colour schemes or logos and things from their stuff. And the badges, was it the BBC banned BLM badges or something like that? I can't remember. But of course, the F1 drivers cucked. So 6 of the F1 drivers didn't take the knee to show solidarity with BLM at the Austrian GP. That's one of the things. Like in Austria, that primal hub of black race of anti-black racism, clearly.
I mean, Hitler.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Although he was more concerned with another demographic, but yes.
I mean, we're supposed to believe that racism is a massive problem in Formula One and needs addressing.
Yes.
From what we've kind of been fed, and you just go, really? I mean, I would have thought that Formula One must surely be one of the most meritocratic industries there is. That basically, if you can find a way of shaving 1/10 of a second per round off the time the car needs, you will get the job. Irrespective of whether
you turn up an F1 game and they're all shouting.
But apparently it's a massive problem, and it's just not diverse enough.
Yeah, Lewis Hamilton isn't black enough. That's what it is. It's just really annoying. Like all these people with their empty end racism. Oh, congratulate! Like a 6-year-old can say that. Like it's infantile, and they even have end racism on the starting line. It's just like, yeah, congratulations, like being against violence. We're all against violence, for goodness sake. So they said, obviously the reasons why we would do it is purely to support BLM. It's for nothing political or anything else. We all understood that we will do what we feel comfortable with. No one is going to be judged or criticised if they don't stand there in a certain way or take a knee. But note that this is him defending his 6 other drivers. This is the guy who won it, one of the guys who did take a knee. He defended the 6 drivers who didn't out of the 20 because they said, saying, we don't want to judge them, apart from the fact that this has been all over the news today because they're judging them effectively. I
love that though. Supporting Black Lives Matter isn't political. It's like the Premier League when they said they're wearing Black Lives Matter badges, but it doesn't mean they endorse Black Lives Matter.
Oh, for goodness!
What are you doing?
Well, even better than the Formula One spectacle
was
the Chicago Red Stars ladies football team.
I know. Just jumping off this for a second. It's like going to Remembrance Day, wearing a poppy, and then saying, "I'm not remembering."
Fucking hate the British.
Yeah. Anyway, go on, Brisha. What's this one about a football team?
Well, there was an incident where there was some ladies' football match, and this was a team obviously from Chicago, so you can imagine Black Lives Matter will feature prominently. And there is a picture of all of them taking a knee but one for the national anthem. All, the entire team, except for one. Now, who do you think afterwards issued a statement explaining her behaviour? So the one person who then had to justify why she didn't take a knee, is the one person who's actually doing the thing you're supposed to do. We really are entering sort of, inverted land by now.
The upside down is here, ladies and gentlemen. And also in cricket, they've all been made to wear the badges as well, which is ridiculous. Right. Burnsy32180 says, Lewis is literally the token black guy that saved F1 from being racist. Clearly. Yes. So we talked about that, talked about BLM.
Sent us earlier saying we were going to talk about the body positivity.
Yes, but I couldn't find anything massively to talk about it, and it was a bit awkward to set up showing on stream. So
except the BBC thing. Did you see that?
What's this one now?
So the BBC put out a thing trying to promote body positivity. and they're getting pilloried for it again.
Yeah, it was basically just a load of fat people saying, why aren't there more black fat women? And why are we being paid less when we're body positive? Surely we be paid the same or a bit more.
Well, no, I think she was actually complaining that they'd made a catalogue of people wearing clothes, and they took the picture of her, the fat black lady, out.
Yeah, that was right.
They didn't think the fat black lady was worth putting in. It's like,
Funny,
this isn't to do with your race, darling.
Oh no, it was to do with like some nudity campaign that they were doing. Yeah,
it's to do with the fact that you're fat.
The last thing that I wanted to really tackle tonight actually was Harry and Meghan, who they're struggling to stay relevant. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex, which I'm pretty sure they're not allowed to call themselves, but they're still calling themselves it abroad, have spoken to young leaders about equal rights, with Harry saying the wrongs of the past need to be acknowledged. Have all of you seen the video of him standing in front of that white wall and sounding like a broken man?
Yes, I think most people have caught that. Yes, where it's not his greatest moment.
No, and it's just there's a great parody actually of someone saying, like, my wife has my balls in a vice. There's nothing I can do. I miss my friends. I've been ostracized and I've been separated from my friends and my family. I miss my lads. I've gone from being one of the most respected and well-liked royals to the butt of every single joke outside of Prince Andrew. So, and it's just, it's so sad. It's so sad to see it, because he's just, look, she can't even trust him to basically sit on his own. That's the thing. She's paranoid as well as anything else. And he just seems very unhappy.
Well, what they will say about any kind of toxic relationship is that it's based on insecurity, where one person is scared that the other person will leave them, or they're scared of their own inadequacies. Put a psychological spin on it.
Oh dear. Anyway, right. Well, we'll finish that off there then for this evening. We have been going for nearly 2 hours. Rory Herbert says, I heard the Britisher found a noose in his garage.
Oh, very much so. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, yes, because
clearly a threat. Yes.
Is it this tiny noose that was found in a car?
So something needs to be done about it. I'm looking for the necessary phone numbers to the United Nations and the Hague court.
And I mean, anti-Britisher sentiment is just a natural thing that resides in us all, Britisher. I don't know what you want to say.
Well, there is that.
Mira J says, are you sure it wasn't the power cable for your brain jar?
I wouldn't know about such things. It's someone else that plugs it in for me.
I don't want to talk about what I plug into your jar, Britisher. That's talk for another time. Well, thank you very much to everyone for turning up for this episode of Fake Accents Unite. I hope you've enjoyed it. Certainly looking forward to bringing you next week's content as well. Hoping to have a video out by then. Is there anything that you wish to shill for us, Poe the Person?
I posted a video just earlier today. If you can go over my channel and watch that, if you want to hear what I have to say about white guilt. That's white guilt.
So that's Poe the Person at Poe the Person. We've also got what is it, Britannica Politica, or
it's a terrible name. I don't know why I've chosen it.
Akkad Secretary on Twitter. Is there anything that you would like to promote whilst you're here?
Go to my YouTube channel. I got some good shit posts.
He does have some good shit posts. I would thoroughly recommend dropping him a sub. And Britisher, anything coming out for you, or how you getting on?
I've got one or two things in the pipeline, but it's a matter of waiting to see when they actually emerge.
Rightio. Well, until next time. Tom of Loxley says, Angry NSO is awesome. Big up your last 2 videos. Well, yes, we'll see how many more polemics come out of me in the next week or so. But thank you very much to everyone for tuning in. Thank you very much to, obviously, everyone who's been on the panel. And I'll see you next time. Have a great week. Take care.
Toodle pip.
Bye.